Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
There she was, his wife, reclining on the couch. She had a smile on her face that could also be construed as a smirk. Her blue eyes were on him, and only him, face unchanging. She was laying on her side with her right arm draped over her side and hip. Her full tits were firm thanks to silicone implants, hiding the fact that she had fed 2 children. A tanned and toned right leg. A bottle of Spanish Cava Barcino was laying on its side, uncorked and empty. She was holding an empty champagne glass with a second empty glass on the floor. He wondered who she was having a champagne party with that evening. Then he heard the gasps and whispers of the 80 people in the gallery as they recognized who was in the portrait. They were mostly patrons and associates of hers, people she knew well, and now they knew even more about her. The whisperers turned to soft clapping as the group enjoyed their first view of the Spanish artist Rolando Ramirez's painting of Carol Digger nude. Carol has been the City Arts Executive Director for the past 6 years and was the founder of the Traveling Artists Program, where semi-famous but popular artists from around the world spend a year in her city working with the Arts Commission. It had been very successful, and Rolando's year will be over in a few days. This night's black tie gala was to display the works of many people in the community, and Rolando's painting was the grand finale. This is not what Gabriel was expecting. Carol Diggins has been Gabriel's wife for almost 20 years. It was his impression that no one other than himself and her gynecologist have seen her nude during that time. Gabe for short, Digger's family had been in this city for over 75 years. His grandfather was a laborer for a dirt moving company, leveling out the hills to make a sound foundation for the thousands of homes that will come later. His father started an earth moving company using bulldozers and road graders. His father was very successful but was also a no-nonsense, hard-working family man that cared for his wife and 5 kids. Gabe was the eldest and was the first to go to work for his father at 12 years old. An important task was one of the first jobs that his grandfather did when he arrived here. A job that still needed to be done to this date and would always be needed: grave digging. His grandfather dug them by hand, and his dad used a backhoe. Young Gabe's job was to jump down into a freshly dug grave after the backhoe did its job and square up all the hole's edges. That way the coffin could be lowered gracefully and rested level on the bottom. This was fun at first for him to work for his father. Then it became something he dreaded, but he valued the experience while in high school. His parents' Scandinavian genetics plus hard physical work created a lean, strong football player for one of the city's high schools. Gabe used every shovelful of dirt to improve his strength and flexibility, conscious of form and development of muscles. The end result was a junior in high school that was 6 feet 4 inches and weighed 225 with speed and agility. The coach played him as linebacker, as he could accelerate into a developing hole and crush the small running back just as he got to the line of scrimmage. It was during a scrimmage with his team mates that he was awarded the nickname of Grave Digger because of the way he picked the running backs up and viciously slammed them onto the ground. On the football field, he was very aggressive but passive in the rest of his life. Gabriel was an average boy and benefited from his home lifestyle of reading and discussions with adults. His father had expended a huge sum of money to buy his children an encyclopedia. This large series of books was the evening's entertainment if there was no homework. Gabe was fascinated by pictures of the great artists. His brothers would rather look at the National Geographic for the occasional Aboriginal bare breast. His sisters were always giddy the week that the new Reader Digest made its way to the mailbox. The home television was only used to see local news and weather. That time was expanded to include the local sports program that usually had an ESPN-like video of Gabe's vicious hits on the football field. He was a quiet guy, not shy. It's just he didn't have a lot to say. He was not afraid to be around other people and was attentive to their conversations. His mother was afraid his lack of conversation was shyness and made sure that he attended his senior prom. They made a deal. He would agree to go to prom but did not have to ask a girl for a date. He had lots of fun and danced with a number of different girls. The girls in his class thought he was sweet and a nice guy and would have gone out with him if he would have asked. Gabe received an athletic scholarship to a 4-year college 2 hours away from his home. His nickname followed him to his new school, and he was soon considered a fan favorite when he blasted a running back trying to evade him. Unlike his teammates, he was in college to gain enough knowledge to make a good life for himself. He enjoyed working at the business his grandfather started and majored in business. Late in the football season in his senior year, we went into a bar that was a student hangout with some teammates. While he was chatting with his buddies, he heard a woman say, "Stop that. Leave me alone." It was not uncommon for couples to argue after a few beers, but this sounded more like she was in distress. He turned and saw 3 guys surrounding a pretty girl, talking to her and pulling at her clothes. She kept slapping their hands and was having a hard time covering her large boobs from being mauled. Being the nice guy he was, he went to her rescue. As he inserted his large frame between the three jerks and the pretty girl, he said, "Guys, I think you need to leave her alone." That brought the normal response from a jerk of, "Buzz off, fat boy. This is none of your business." That was, until one of the other jerks said, "Oh shit, it's Grave Digger. I'm sorry, Digger. We were just teasing. We'll go now." He turned and started pushing his drunken buddies back. One of the jerks said, "Buzz off," and turned like he was leaving. From the way he turned, Gabe knew this chicken shit was going to try to sucker punch him. So, he subtly changed his footing to counter his swing. Sure enough, the dummy swung at Gabe's face with his right hand. His fist was caught midair by Gabe's big left paw. His open right hand swung around and slapped him in the face. His body did a full 360-degree pirouette and fell to the floor. His eyes were glazed over, and all he could mumble was, "What the hell was that?" The crowd howled with laughter at this fool. They knew that if Grave Digger would have used his fist, he would be either dead or have a broken jaw. His friends picked the punk up and dragged him out to the laughter and jeers of the students. Gabe turned to the pretty brown-haired girl and said, "Are you okay?" She replied, "Yes, thank you so much." He could tell she was still upset and said, "Come sit with me in this booth until they go away." He did not want to imply that she was still scared or afraid. "I would like that," she mumbled. The waitress came over to see if the young lady was okay, and Gabe asked for a couple of Cokes. He turned to the still shaken woman and said, "I'm Gabe, short for Gabriel. What's your name?" "My name is Carol Martin. Did I hear him call you Grave Digger?" "Grave Digger is my football name. I'm just Gabe." She brightened up and said, "I watch you every Saturday afternoon. My sorority girlfriends and I are big fans of yours. They will die knowing I'm sitting here having a Coke with you." Then the usual college question and answer ritual began. "What's your major? Where are you from? What are you going to do after graduation?" Carol was an art major and wanted to eventually run an art gallery. While talking, she was surprised that Gabe was asking all the questions. He wanted to know about her and what she was interested in. Most of the athletes she had met were more interested in trying to impress her with what they had done than what she was interested in. When Gabe told her he also was interested in art classes, she decided to test him as to his sincerity about liking the same things. Or was he just saying anything to get a relationship going? She queried, "Have you taken any art classes here? Our art department is supposedly one of the best in this part of the country." He smiled and said, "Yes, I have. I know I have no talent to create art, but I have a great passion for the visual arts, painting in particular. I've taken art appreciation 1 and 2 so far." Carol was shocked with his response. She pressed, "Who was your instructor?" He replied, "Dr. Benson, the funny little guy with the unusual accent in my sophomore class. I was in that class. I did not see you. Where did you sit? How could I have missed a guy like you?" She replied, "Back row for 2 reasons. Nobody could see around or over me if I sat up front. Plus, I was always a couple of minutes late for my business management 2 class the other side of campus." Gabe watched the jerks coming toward him and took a defensive stance. They backed off and said, "Whoa, we come in peace. We want to apologize for being rude to your girlfriend." Gabe was going to say, "She's not my girlfriend," but didn't. The mouthy jerk turned to her and said, "Carol, I'm sorry I offended you. Please forgive my poor behavior. I didn't know you were Grave Digger's girlfriend." Carol started to say, "He's not my boyfriend," but didn't. Gabe shook their hands and they left the bar. Carol said, "Wow, you have a real presence in a room, don't you?" Those boys were about to pee their pants. "All the men in this bar are admiring you, and all the women are jealous of me being with you. I am so happy to be able to meet you. Can we get together again sometime when you don't have to rescue me?" With a big smile, he said, "Yes, I'd like that. Can I drive you home?" "You sure can, Grave Digger," said with the sweetest voice. As soon as he dropped her off, she turned and kissed his cheek and said, "Remember that until another time." Her evening was not spent studying. It was telling her story of being rescued by the Grave Digger. The girls could not wait for him to come into their sorority house to see and meet him. The end of the football season was closing in and his team was in the playoffs, so Gabe's time was in short supply. He wanted to retain his academic status, so his study time took up what was left of his free time. He did maintain his contact with Carol through texts, FaceTime, and phone calls. They were able to have some 1-hour study breaks by making a Starbucks run. They tried to have a coffee break at the sorority, but many of the girls decided they also wanted to chat with the Grave Digger. Gabe had the same problem with Carol being the object of the other athletes' attention if they went to his dorm. They both realized how attractive they each were to the other's friends. That fully endorsed their feelings about their relationship. They had spent enough time together that they wanted to become more intimate, but were limited in privacy and time. Some titty kissing and some dick rubbing in his pickup was as close to sex as these two people could put together. They vowed next semester would be different as football season would be over. Gabe's team made it to the playoffs, however. His Fighting Tigers were beaten in the quarterfinal game. Carol had left her sorority house at the end of the semester to spend Christmas with her family 3 hours away. This was while Gabe continued to practice and work their way through the playoffs. Their only communication continued to be electronic. With Christmas behind them and Gabe playing his final football game, Carol and Gabe decided to spend the New Year's together. Carol asked if Gabe was okay with going to Kansas City and spending a few days to see 2 great art museums there. After checking his calendar, he responded, "I would love to do that with you with only one change in plans. I'll go to any art museum you want, provided you come with me on Sunday afternoon to Arrowhead Stadium to watch the Kansas City Chiefs play football." She laughed and said, "That's fine, but don't try to stay late and get autographs." Smiling, he said, "Great, we have a deal. I'll get the football tickets and arrange the hotel while you get the museums lined up." As Gabe drove, Carol was constantly chattering about her Christmas with her family and friends. Gabe was loving every minute with her recounting what had gone on in her life since the last time they were together. He had arranged for a hotel room near the plaza, an upscale entertainment and dining area. After putting their luggage in the room, Gabe took her to her first surprise of the evening, a horse-drawn carriage around the plaza. All the roof lines were lit up with white lights and a light snow was falling on them as they cuddled under a buffalo hide blanket. They walked arm in arm back to their hotel in the snowfall. He asked, "Would you like a drink at the hotel bar?" Quickly, she answered, "No, I want you." Beaming, he replied, "Then you shall have me," as he hustled her to the elevator. By the time they reached their room, the snow had melted off their coats and shoes. After a lingering kiss in the middle of the room, they started undressing each other. Sweaters, shirts, shoes, socks, and pants came off. Dressed only in black flimsy bra and thong panties, she stood admiring his physique. Her hands could not stop their tactile exploration of his chest. His fingers lightly ran down her neck and arms. Breaking eye contact, she put her head on his chest and whispered, "I have never seen such a powerful yet beautiful man in my life." He responded with an urgent and passionate kiss. She broke from the kiss to start pulling his boxers out of her way. She wanted nothing between them. Everything about this man was perfect in her judgment. This was the final test before her commitment to this man. So far, so good. Gabe was beside himself, mentally, physically, and sexually. He had always excelled physically in life, but this had his heart racing faster than any of the 40-yard wind sprints he did in football practice. He had hinted this to her, but she may not have comprehended it with his poor speaking skills. He was still a virgin. He had kissed some girls, but never had intercourse. Now he was having the prettiest woman he had ever seen. He would just have to go with the flow and see what developed. He knew where the goal line was, but he was still back on his 20-yard line without a quarterback to call the plays. He decided his best course of action was to do things that pleased Carol and not worry about what else was going on. After playing around each other, in a low growl, she said, "I want you now. Get on that bed and do me." He was ready to preform and immediately started slamming into her. He was a highly trained athlete with stamina and strength. Couple that with the fact that this was the woman he was in love with, and he wanted her to be totally satisfied with him sexually. She grunted with every powerful stroke into her. Their eyes locked, but neither was seeing or comprehended the lust that was transferred between the two of them. Gabe rolled off her and tried to get his breath. Carol did the same. She was the first to speak. "Wow, I did not expect that out of you. You are the best lover I have ever had." "I agree, you are my best ever also," he said with a shit-eating grin on his face. She laughed, started to tickle him, and was surprised the big muscular guy was so ticklish. That extraordinary lovemaking ended the old year. The new year was rung in with Carol again howling her level of sexual satisfaction to anyone within earshot. They ordered from room service and Carol jumped from the bed, put on an unbuttoned shirt, and opened the door for their meal. The young man bumped the rolling table into a chair as he was peering at the cleavage between the shirt buttons. He refused to tip, but asked for them to order some snacks later on. He also said, "Please ask for Robert to deliver." They both laughed as Robert stumbled out of the room. Gabe was a little miffed that she was so eager to show off her nude body. When she realized his problem, she said, "I don't mind people seeing me nude. We all have basically the same body. Mine just happens to be what people like to see. For me, it's okay to look, but do not touch. Unless it's you, Gabe." With that being said, she walked to the window and pulled the curtains wide open. "Let the whole world see what we're about. I'm not afraid of what people think, and you shouldn't be either." You are a rare man with a beautiful body you should not hide. Just remember, no one else gets to touch you, just me. The next day, after their wake-up shit, they spent the day at the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art. Carol was beside herself experiencing all the different artists and their messages. She made sure that Gabe enjoyed the nude portraits, paintings, and sculptures to justify her feeling of freedom. Even though it was a fine winter day, Carol was cold at the football game and used that excuse to cuddle Gabe under a heavy blanket. A blanket that hid her hands on his meat to keep her fingers warm, or so she said. The Chiefs' victory was not as much fun as their time together. Carol had the bright idea of stopping by her parents on the way back so they could meet Gabe. At this point, he was ready to do whatever she wanted him to do, even if it was 3 hours out of their way. Her parents' house was as average as a house can be. The people inside were not as normal as he expected. From the appearance of the furniture and decorations, it seems they are trapped in a time warp. It looked like a movie set for a hippie sitcom of the late 1960s. They were intelligent people and talented in music, art, and literature. Both had been in bands that traveled the Midwest but never made the big time. They enjoyed the company of the large, quiet man that was obviously in love with their daughter. Since he was driving, Gabe declined the magic smoke bowl that was passed around. Later on, Carol's mother brought out a bowl of rabbit and gerbil, food for the evening's nourishment. Gabe was by nature a carnivore but did not see any protein source larger than a garbanzo bean, so he just planned on having steak and eggs for breakfast the next morning. He understood why her parents were so slim and fit. They practiced starving themselves. As they got ready to leave, Carol's mother gave Gabe a full body hug and a kiss on the lips. She made sure that Gabe knew that she did not believe in putting her large tits in a bra. Her father and Gabe had a man hug and back slap at the door. As they drove off, Carol asked Gabe if he liked her parents. He replied, "I liked them. They were real people. People that liked being themselves, and they don't give a shit about what anyone else thinks. They enjoy life as they make it for themselves. This world would be better off with more people like them." Carol sat there amazed. Wow, you really dissected the 30 past years of their life in one paragraph. You don't talk a lot, but when you do, something really cerebral comes out. I am so lucky for you to fall in love with me. Very lucky. Gabe just shook his head and smiled. At the start of their last semester, Gabe and Carol moved in together in a modest off-campus apartment. It wasn't difficult for Gabe, but it was unusual for him that Carol would strip naked as soon as she got home from classes. At first, he thought it was her way of telling him that she wanted him to screw her. She eventually told him just because she was naked, she did not need him to make love to her at that minute. He was welcome to do that whenever he wanted, but there was no requirement just because she was naked. She told him being naked gave her a sense of freedom. As they compared class schedules, Carol told Gabe, "I have a job every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. It lasts for at least an hour, and I get paid $100 per class." Gabe expressed his surprise by saying, "Wow, that's good pay for only an hour. What do you do to get $100 per hour?" "It's a modeling job for the class, drawing the human form. It's a level 4 course for seniors only, with usually no more than 12 people," replied Carol. "What do you model?" he questioned. "Me. I model me." Gabe pushed the question, "How do you model yourself?" "I don't understand." Shy, she said, just above a whisper, "I model me. I am a nude model for the class." "You certainly have the body for it, but I am surprised I fell for a stripper." Sternly, she said, "I am not a stripper. I do not take of my clothes so men can leer at my body. This is for the development and promotion of the arts. Students have to learn to draw the human body. I pose for 6 weeks of classes, then a guy poses for the next 6 weeks. He is definitely not a stripper. The last 6 weeks of the semester is couples drawing, and I do not pose with anybody else." She continued, "Now if you wanted to take that magnificent body of yours to this class, they would love to have you to pose by yourself and with me. How about it, big boy? We could make $200 for an hour's work. You like being around me when I'm naked." "Don't think I could do that," was all he could say. "Gabe, I have been modeling that class since my freshman year. You've seen how my parents live. I've had to scramble to have enough money to get through school. This was easy, quick, and safe. I know girls that do strip at clubs, and I would never do that as I'd rather starve to death." Gabe mumbled something that sounded like, "Just what do you do?" Carol said, "I have a contract with the school, and I have a set of my own rules for the sitting. Everyone puts their cell phone in a box on entering class. No one takes my picture ever. No one ever touches me. If they do, I am out of there, and the school still pays me. At the end of my sessions, the instructor grades all the drawings and gives them all to me so no one walks out with a drawing of me nude. You will not see my likeness on any guy's dorm wall. If I like the drawings, I will keep them. If not, they are burned in the pottery kiln. Can I show you the drawings I have kept?" Sure, he stuttered. Carol brought out a dozen drawings and paintings of different sizes from a closet and put them on a table. She smiled, waved her hand like Vanna White and said, "Come see my portfolio." He shuffled through the pictures and exclaimed, "These are beautiful, exceptionally good works of art. I can't believe these are just students. I'm surprised you don't have them up on a wall." She hugged him and said, "They are my private items, only to be seen by those who love me and I love them. You and my parents are the only ones, outside of the class, that have seen these." "What did you parents think of posing nude?" he questioned. Smiling, she said, "Who do you think gave me the idea? You've met my mom. She was never a stripper, but she did a lot of art class nude modeling. This is something I never thought would happen. Give me some time to come to grips with this risque behavior. I don't want to tell you what you can and can't do, but I can tell you if I approve or not," said while he stroked his chin. With a smirk, he asked, "Can I put this painting up on the wall in my den?" Carol could not contain her laughter and said, "Of course, but remember, no one else is to see it." "Seriously, Gabe, I would like you to come to a session where I am modeling to see just what goes on. If you don't want to go, I could video a typical class for you." He replied, "I'll think about it." "Okay." Her response was, "While you're thinking about it, remember this class starts next week and I am under contract to do it." The end result was Gabe's acceptance of her nude modeling, but he did have one caveat. He would walk her to and from her class every time she posed. That was entirely acceptable to Carol. Both Carol and Gabe graduated in the spring. Gabe already had a job lined up with his father in the dirt moving business. His business management degree would be a welcome addition to his father's growing business. Carol did not find an art gallery to work at, but was fortunate to find employment as an art teacher within the city school system. She had to travel between different locations during the day, but that was not a problem. Gabe proposed marriage to Carol at Christmas with a June wedding as soon as school was out. The wedding was not a huge social event for the city, but the barn party on his father's farm was a big hit with both Gabe and Carol's friends. Carol was surprised when Gabe drove her to the train station. They were taking Amtrak to Santa Fe, New Mexico. The newlyweds stayed at La Posada, a 4.5-star luxury hotel built in 1935. The hotel is in the center of the city's art district and a meeting place for many art enthusiasts. Her appreciation of him bringing her to such a city was overwhelming. Even though he was only 22 years old, he was seriously considering finding a Viagra dispenser. They started their day with making love, then Southwestern breakfast, sex, shower, and going to art galleries in the afternoons. The evenings, to the smell of pinyon pine burning in chimeneas, were spent walking up and down Canyon Road to visit the many art and sculpture galleries. Since it was tourist season, many galleries treated their guests to wine and delightful cheeses. The real treat for Carol was a day-long trip to Abiquiu where Georgia O'Keeffe had her main studio and spent most of her time. Even though Gabe was quiet about it, he was delighted to take in her beautiful artwork. Georgia O'Keeffe was his favorite American artist, and he really enjoyed the time they spent where she performed her artistry. With the glow of honeymoon bliss behind them, they moved into a rental house in Gabe's hometown. Gabe's mother was delighted in having a new daughter, and the two became close. His father was pleased to have his hardworking son back in town. Not only was he a trusted worker, his management skills seemed to improve every month. In addition to her high school teaching, Carol started to do some volunteer work with the city's Arts Commission. Her knowledge and enthusiasm of the arts were appreciated by the commission. On their second wedding anniversary, they found out she was pregnant with twins. She took 4 months maternity leave and a summer off, then went back to teaching. After teaching and volunteering at the Arts Commission for years, Carol was appointed as the executive director of the City Arts Commission. This job was close to the exact career that Carol had planned for herself. Gabe and his father had grown the business and were quite prosperous. Gabe had added more technology to their company with directional drills, ground-penetrating radar, and new trenching equipment. Citizens laughed that their company still did all the grave digging in the community, although it was more for community benefit than company revenue. Gabe's nickname of Grave Digger became part of the corporate name. With this prosperity, Gabe was given a 40-acre tract of land off his father's farm to build a home. They both decided in arts and crafts, home style would be the best for their forever home. The twin boys, Carrie and Kim, enjoyed life on the farm, with each of them having their own horse. In order for the boys to begin to learn responsibility, they had horses, calves, and chickens to feed twice a day. The City Arts Commission thrived under Carol's leadership and drive. More people were attending classes, speakers, and events. Using some of her Santa Fe connections from her honeymoon, Carol started by inviting successful artists to come to town to discuss their philosophies and thoughts about the arts. The latest artist was Rolando Ramirez from Barcelona, Spain, and was contracted to stay for 1 year working with the Arts Commission. His duties would include teaching painting/drawing classes, giving lectures, and promoting the work of the Arts Commission. Plus, he would have time to continue his own painting. It was requested that he share these works within the context of his teaching. The first several weeks Rolando was in town, Carol escorted him to various meetings, luncheons, and dinners. He made short presentations at the city council, city libraries, Lions Club, Kiwanis, various schools, and other civic organizations. Several country clubs offered him a complimentary membership that allowed him to eat, drink, and entertain at the club without paying dues. Rolando was a very smooth talker, especially around the ladies. To the local women, he appeared to be very sophisticated, mainly because he came from Europe. He was not quite as tall as the average American male of 5'9" tall. His hair was jet back and slick to the touch and in appearance. Usually, he had it pulled back in a ponytail, and he was thin but not particularly fit or muscular. Every evening that Carol was home, she told Gabe about what Rolando said, did, and thought. It was to the point that Gabe was tired of the new Spaniard in town before they had time to meet each other. In typical Gabriel style, he did not express his opinion vocally of having too much discussion about Rolando. Of course, Gabe realized this new artist in town developed a renewed interest in the Arts Commission, something that Carol felt was very important, both for her employment and her genuine interest in the arts. One evening, during dinner, Carol told Gabe that she would like to have Rolando to their home for dinner one evening. He said, "If that is what you want to do, I'm fine with it. He probably will not enjoy a trip out into the country to have dinner at a property that has a barn and animals." She replied, "He's so polite. He'll never complain about coming here. Are you free next Wednesday evening to have him here? The boys have a 4-H supper and meeting that night." "Yes," he said, and thought, might as well get this over with. The next Wednesday, he came home early, showered, and dressed up with slacks and Tommy Bahama silk shirt. Carol was wearing a new lightweight sundress that flattered her hips, waist, and breasts. Gabe thought, that's too nice a dress to be entertaining this guy. Carol was concerned that Rolando was a half-hour late in arriving and was just about to call his cell phone when she saw his BMW come down the gravel driveway. A sweaty and disgruntled Rolando crawled out of the car and slammed the door. Why in the world would anyone want to live this far outside of civilization? I drove for miles on a dirt road and saw nothing but grass and wild animals. Carol, my love, why in God's name do you put up with this isolation? Laughing, she said, "It is so peaceful in the evenings. We love it here." As Rolando came to the house, he put both hands on her to kiss her hello. Gabe thought it was presumptuous to have his hands on her for 30 seconds. Still with his arm around her, Rolando turned his gaze toward Gabe and said, "Oh, I believe this is your husband, the Dirtmeister." Gabe heard the snide remark, but kept his face neutral. However, he did not walk forward to greet the Spaniard, but waited for him to come greet the host. Carol grabbed Rolando's hand and pulled him to meet her husband. Gabe extended his hand and was greeted by a dead fish handshake by Rolando. Gabe smiled and said, "Glad to meet you." Rolando replied, "My lovely Carol has told me that we should meet." Rolando presented Gabe with a couple bottles of 1730 Pedro Jimenez Spanish wine and said, "Be careful how you open that delicate bottle." As they drank the first bottle of wine, Rolando told the American couple about his world travels and people in the art world who are his friends. Carol sat in rapt attention upon hearing the names of famous artists. After dinner and the third bottle of wine was opened, gently, by the host, Rolando asked, "Gabby, I've been meaning to ask, how much dirt can a dirt man dig if a dirt man digs all day?" Then laughed at his own humor. Carol politely chuckled, but clearly thought this was out of bounds. She smiled at Gabe and knew he was holding his temper because of her. Another time, and another guy would have Gabe grabbing the top of their head and squeezing so hard their eyeballs would bug out. She knew he was holding back, and she would reward him for that later that evening. Gabe waited, then said, "Enough dirt to make a good, not extravagant but good living." He was pleased with his life, his wife, his boys, and his home. What more could he want? Continuing his perceived snubs, Rolando asked, "Gabby, who is your favorite artist?" "Charles Schultz, maybe?" Quickly, Carol said, "Rolando, the name is Gabe, not Gabby. Just as your name is Rolando and not Rolades." Gabe snickered at her remark. Slowly, Gabe said, "A man's home is his castle, and it should be a place of peace and tranquility. This house is styled in the arts and crafts vision of simplicity and quality. Not quite as showy as Frank Lloyd Wright, but similar with a toned-down theme. My favorite European artist is Carl Oscar Larsen. His work came after the Impressionists Monet and Renoir. He was a forerunner of the arts and crafts movement and used watercolors to portray an idyllic family lifestyle unlike the modernists. You will find a number of his works here in our home. Georgia O'Keeffe is my favorite American artist. This answer was not something that Rolando thought would come out of the mouth of a dirt digger. Dogs playing poker on velvet was what he thought Gabe would be his favorite painting. Carol said, "Shall we call this an evening? I need my beauty sleep and Gabe always gets up early for work." They all arose at the same time, and Rolando once again put his hands on Carol to kiss her cheek and say, "Good night, my dear." As Rolando drove out the driveway, Carol turned to Gabe and said, "Lock the doors, turn out the lights, and get upstairs." Then she hurried up the stairway. He did not see Carol as he timidly entered their bedroom. Her stern voice said, "Stop right there, mister." Before he could turn around, she came at him as a tan flash. "I'll teach you to talk about our house like that." Then gave him a BJ and started having wild sex. While being pounded, she grabbed his face and told him, "If you ever speak that lovingly about your home and family again, I will treat you even harsher than I am now. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am," was all that came out of his heavily breathing mouth. For the next 8 months, Carol kept her husband and Rolando apart as much as possible. The two men were cordial, but not friendly. Rolando was surprised that he could not seem to get under Gabe's skin with his innuendos and snide remarks. The real reason was that Gabe didn't care one bit what Rolando had to say. Early in the summer, Gabe was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting when Bob Planter, president of the bank Gabe did business with, pulled him aside and said, "Can I buy you a beer and talk to you privately?" "Sure, Bob. Let's go next door to Paulie's Pub," Gabe replied. After they had ordered, Bob turned to Gabe and said, "I'm sure you've heard Patty and I are getting a divorce." "Yes, that was sad news. You've been married over 20 years, haven't you?" Bob stared at his beer and said, "Yeah, 20 great years until that damn Spaniard come to town. He filled her head with romantic ideas, screwed her until she was crazy for him. Then he told her to stay with to her clueless cuck husband, and he will continue to have sex with her. He sent me videos of him having sex with her, just to humiliate me. I want to kill him, but then who would take care of my kids? 2 are still in high school. She is now crazy mad at me for not making a more glamorous life for her. My attorney says I am really going to be in a mess socially, financially, and emotionally from this. I want to reconcile with her, but I cannot as long as he is in town." "That sounds terrible, Bob. If I can do anything for you, anything at all, just tell me." Bob pleaded. "Gabe, somehow we need to get that creep out of this town. He is still stirring the pot, making Patty crazy. I heard he got the Henderson's daughter, Chloe, pregnant too. She was a waitress at our country club and fell for his European sophistication and got knocked up. He laughed at her when she told him she was pregnant, but said he was willing to continue screwing her if she liked. Try to get your wife to see clear to get him out of town. Can you do that, please?" "I'll do my best to get Carol to make him leave," was Gabe's promise. After drying his eyes, Bob said, "Watch out, Gabe. I'm pretty sure he will come after your wife next. He told Patty he was going to do a nude painting of Carol before he left town. If he does that, he will try to humiliate you more than me." Gabe vowed, "I'll get on this right away. Thanks for the warning. I just can't live without my Carol." Gabe had no doubt that slimy creep wants to have sex with Carol. Who wouldn't? She's gorgeous. Plus, Rolando likes to humiliate the husbands of his conquests. It was going to be difficult to talk to Carol about this, as she knows that he dislikes Rolando. After their boys had left the supper table to do their homework, Gabe thought he would approach Carol about the Rolando problem. He asked, "How are things going in the Arts Commission this month?" She answered, "Great. Most of our classes are full, and there just seems to be more energy all around." "Are Rolando's classes and lectures being well attended?" "Yes, they are. We have to add extra chairs to get everyone in." He asked, "By everyone, do you mean all the ladies, or are there many men attending?" With a puzzled look on her face, she said, "Come to think of it, there are few men in the classes. I just thought it was because they were at work and couldn't attend. The night classes are mostly working women." I never gave that a thought." Cautiously, he said, "Considering how he treated me when we first met. Maybe he treats all the men rudely so they don't attend. Is it because he is intimidated by men, or he would prefer to be around ladies without the men?" "Carol, I have been approached by some local men who are taking exception to the amount of attention he is paying to their wives. One man even told me his wife and Rolando were having an affair. Have you heard anything about this?" Carol responded, "No, not at all, but Rolando is a hands-on kind of guy. He is always giving hugs and kisses to all the ladies. That's just his way. He's very complimentary to women, as most husbands are not. That can create strife." Gabe said, "Yeah, that's probably what is going on, but I thought I had better inform you of what I am hearing. If there is some problem, you will need to nip it in the bud before the Arts Commission and you get embarrassed." With a grin, she said, "Thank you for looking out for me. That's why I love you." Unknown to Gabe, Rolando had convinced Carol to have him paint a nude portrait of her for their 20th anniversary. The painting would be done in one of the Arts Commission studios, which was in an old downtown warehouse. The portrait would be for Carol and Gabe's eyes only. It would not be on open display. Carol knew that she still displayed all the physical harms that all women want, but the flips of the calendar told her that the big 50 was looming. She did not want to wait until then, as she could only go downhill from here. No clothes were shed during the first meeting of Carol's nude portrait. They talked about the sitting, topic, accessories, background, and physical stance. Rolando drew out a quick sketch of what they had thought would accomplish Carol's dream portrait. It was agreed that the two of them would meet in that warehouse on Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. until the portrait was completed. Despite Rolando's recommendation, Carol was not nude during the first 3 sittings. She knew he had canvas work to do prior to her stripping. She was quite nervous on the 4th session when she knew she had to be nude. Rolando had a bottle of a very nice white wine for her. She felt Rolando was a little too complimentary about her physical assets. At that time, Rolando broke one of Carol's basic rules: "Thou shalt not touch." She stopped him mid-sentence and told him, "Hey, we agreed no touching. If you want me to move something, you tell me. You do not touch me." He apologized profusely for his unwanted familiarity with her body. Rolando could sense her hesitancy to be nude around him and interpreted it in the most extreme manner. He stripped his clothes off, saying, "I see you are timid, so let's put us both on the same plane. Now neither one of us has an advantage over the other." Then he stepped in front of his easel and did a theatrical bow, displaying what he thought was a sex organ she could not ignore. Carol stifled a snicker as his tool was as thin as the rest of his body. He certainly did not have the heavy-duty equipment that her husband had at his command. He thought he recognized a dissing of his manhood, but he knew his charm would have her spreading her legs for him prior to having the painting complete. The Thursday night sessions lasted between 60 and 90 minutes. While Carol remained in the same pose, Rolando spent the time complimenting her beauty and her sexiness. He occasionally said something that could be taken as a slap against Gabe, but never a direct insult. He felt he had plenty of time to seduce her. Besides, he also had a couple other women he was wiggling his meat in. Gabe was watching Carol's actions and relationship with him. She did not display the normal clues of a cheating wife. If she was horny after her Thursday night activity, he made sure no one else had been near her before him that day. She did not run to take a shower as she got home or hide hickeys or bite marks. Any mention of Rolando was in a general session of the conversation that included other people, never just him. Gabe did take the opportunity to mention Chloe Henderson's pregnancy and Bob Planter's marital problem in off-the-cuff remarks. Carol seemed concerned about the situation but did not offer any solutions. She did remind him that Rolando's 1-year contract would be over soon and all will go back to being fine. As the painting progressed and with Rolando's contract expiring, Carol came home one evening just bubbling with joy. At dinner, she told Gabe and the boys, "I have been invited to New York City and will help Rolando set up a one-man show in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It will take a couple of days to set up, then we will be given a private tour of the Met. Rolando has a number of named artists we will get to join for dining and drinking wine. The Met has a 3-bedroom apartment facing Central Park that they will provide for Rolando and I during the week we're there." Kim and Carrie were very impressed at their mother's news, not so much with Gabe. This news had all the red flags flying for Gabe, but he joined in the celebration of one of Carol's life dreams. He could never dash her dream trip the minute she talked about it. He would have to have a plan to protect her from a known predator, Rolando. A week later, Carol had the feeling that Gabe was not on board with her New York trip, so she asked him, "You don't seem to be as happy as I am about this trip. Is there a problem? Do you think I shouldn't go? I would love for you to go to New York and do all the things you want to do, but I think we have a real problem with Rolando. Are you forbidding me to go to New York?" she asked. "No, just not with Rolando." Now she was getting upset. "I can handle him, no problem. We have a deal, no touching. He treats me like a lady." Looking directly into her eyes, he said, "It just isn't going to happen." Back and forth they went. "Why not?" "Not going to happen. Give me a reason." "Not happening. Period." "Are you forbidding me?" "No, I don't want you to go." "Then I will go to New York." "Not going to happen." They finally met a stalemate and quit talking to each other. It was quiet at breakfast but not freezing cold. Both knew what the other's point was, but both had their reasons for it to or not to happen. Gabe went into the bedroom as Carol was dressing, gave her a kiss and said, "I really love you. I could not live without you. You know that, don't you?" She responded with a kiss, then said, "I know, and I love you too." Gabe went to the office for an hour to make sure Gravediggers Incorporated was functioning on all cylinders. He told Barbara, his secretary, office manager, and friend that he was going to be gone for the rest of the day on a special project. He called the local Case construction equipment dealership and asked if he could try out the new Case 5690 Super N backhoe. Gabe said that he needed a 3-foot bucket to do a test. The dealer was ecstatic as Grave Diggers Incorporated had a reputation of buying good equipment. The dealer loaded the new backhoe on Gabe's trailer and asked to join him. "Nah, I don't want to waste your time." Gabe took the trailer to his home and drove to one of the cattle pens that was not in use. There he dug 2 holes, side by side, 6 feet long, 6 feet deep and 3 feet wide. He laughed at how easy this was as compared to his beginning career. When the hole sizes pleased him, he grabbed a shovel and squared out the bottom like his father and grandfather had taught him. When Carol came home, she saw the boys in the cattle pens and thought she would see how their day went. They said, "Fine, but what's with the holes in the other pen?" She smiled and said, "Have you ever figured out what is on your dad's mind?" Then they all had a good laugh. She didn't even ask him about it at dinner as she knew she would not understand. The reason for Gabe's success in business was his ability to analyze each situation then make a plan. His skills allowed his father to retire and move to Southwest Florida. He was willing to risk his marriage if his plan failed. Gabe called the Med in New York and asked about the Rolando Ramirez showing next month. After several phone transfers, a woman told him there was no showing. He said, "Thank you," and continued with his next part of his plan. Gabe had installed locators on all the pickups, trucks, and large equipment, both for efficiency and possible theft recovery. He quickly installed a unit in Carol's car and a locator on her cell phone. Her cell phone was on the company's plan, so he started reviewing her emails and texts. There was no indication of love or sex between Carol and Rolando on any of the emails or texts. They talked about where they would eat and what shows they would see while in New York, nothing about the art show. He wondered if this was just a sex trip for the two of them, or was she being duped so that the slimy Spaniard can get into her pants? From the locator, he found out where they were meeting on Thursday nights. It wasn't what he expected. He was afraid they were at the nicest hotel in the city, not a warehouse. He drove his pickup to the warehouse/art studio and parked a block away and walked. He could not see anything as the doors were locked and any windows were too high to see from. He backed up his pickup to the closest window and stood on the sideboards to see inside. What he saw almost knocked him off the pickup. It was his wife, nude on a couch with the slime ball painting her portrait. They were talking and laughing while his brushes transposed her image to canvas. He sat back from his easel and motioned her to him. She rose and strolled nonchalantly toward her painter, not bothering to put on the robe that laid at her feet, her curves gently jiggling as she walked on stiletto heels. Gabe was ready to shatter the window with his fist, but decided to wait to see what happened next. He had his cell phone camera ready to record any infidelity. As Rolando backed away from his easel, Gabe saw that he also was naked. That made him breathe fire hot enough to melt the glass in front of him. His love of 20-plus years stood nude next to this skinny asshole as they discussed something. The slime ball had the audacity to put his hand on her bare ass as he made a point. Carol made a half-turn with her body and gave his face a strong slap, followed by her shaking her index finger at him while speaking. Rolando laughed. Carol didn't. Her pose of legs slightly spread, hands on full hips with tits moving with every heavy breath, turned both Gabe and Rolando on. Then she stomped back to her position on the couch, while Rolando rubbed his cheek. When the painting session was over, Carol put on her street clothes before giving Rolando a goodbye hug and kiss on the cheek. Rolando tried to push his naked crotch toward her, but she skillfully moved to hug him from the side and not the front. Gabe now knew she was not cheating yet, but she was spending a lot of time with him nude. That concerned him enough to purchase another motion-detecting camera and place it on the window at the warehouse. He also installed a locator on Rolando's rental car as he wanted to know if they were meeting elsewhere. Carol and Gabe were pleasant and loving with each other at home, so long as they did not talk about Carol's intention of going to New York. Carol was busy with preparing for a black tie fundraising gala that would feature the Spanish artist's work. Included in the program were accomplishments of local artists and various talented children. 2 nights before the gala, Carol came home a little late because she had gone shopping after work. Gabe was outside when she drove up, saw packages and hanging clothes, and he offered help her bring them in the house. He knew she was wanting a new dress for the gala, but asked why she had purchased several other items. She said, "New clothes for my trip to New York on Friday." He thought about dropping them on the ground and walking on, but that would create new strife. Instead, he said, "Make sure you keep the receipts to return those clothes without wearing them." She snapped, "Do you think I'll be in New York naked?" Glaring at her, he said, "That'll be the last thing you ever do." She noticed that could be taken 2 ways, one positive and one very negative. Either way, it really pissed her off and she said, "What do you mean by that?" Shrugging, he said, "Never mind. It's not going to happen, so why argue about it?" "Don't tell me what to do," she snapped. She also changed her mind. Her portrait was to be seen only by her husband and her. To show him she can do what she wants, the portrait will be the feature of the gala. The next day, since Carol had not been happy with him the last couple of weeks, she asked him, "Are you sure you want to go tonight?" "I don't mind if you stay home. It's better than starting a fight with Rolando." "I'm fine," was his response. The food menu was heavy hors d'oeuvres, but that's not the only thing was going to be served up. The waiters had a hard time keeping all the glasses of champagne and wine full. Rolando spent a lot of time with the ladies in their low-cut evening gowns. He hoped he could add a couple of new conquests before he left town with Carol in a couple of days. He also was looking forward to the verbal humiliation he was going to heap on that stupid ditch digger tonight. The last items on the agenda included some comments by Carol, comments by Rolando, unveiling of the draped portrait on the main wall, and then requests for continued funding for the Arts Commission. Gabe knew the schedule except for the portrait being unveiled. He stationed himself near the front, but to the side of the small podium that Carol would speak from. Carol always publicly thanked him for supporting her. He wondered if she would say that this year. Carol concluded her remarks without recognizing Gabe. Rolando effused about all the wonderful people he had met, and that would remain forever in his heart. Carol and Rolando grabbed the corners of the veiled portrait as she told the crowd, "Now, for the finale of our year with the artist Rolando Ramirez, an original painting." They slowly pulled the cover off. At first there was gasps and whispers as patrons recognized the subject. Slight applause was followed by "Bravo, wonderful, excellent." Rolando made sure he stepped to the limelight in front of the portrait and said, "This is one of the most beautiful subjects I have ever had," greatly emphasizing had to create double entendre. "I want to thank her accepting husband Gabriel for letting me use his wife for the past month. She was such a willing subject and would obey my every suggestion. I will now give her back to the guy she calls her husband. Thank you." At this point, all eyes were on Gabe for the obvious implications of the relationship Rolando had with his wife. Was this mountain of a man that much of a cuck? While Rolando turned to bow to a tall blonde who he had targeted for later that night, Gabe grabbed the microphone away from Rolando. He stepped forward and said, "Isn't he a fun guy to be around? Always teasing and always doing or saying something outrageous. I call him my favorite little spaniel, just a silly guy." Some people caught that he used the word spaniel instead of Spaniard. Was he calling Rolando a dog to his face? They thought this is maybe interesting. Our favorite spaniel did not get to thank many of the local people that helped create this masterpiece. First off, I need to thank Best Buy for providing the app that allows a guy like Ro to convert a photo into the paint by the number format. Carol gave him a photo of herself that I took earlier this year. It really saved Carol a lot of time by not having to lay naked on a couch. Thanks to Bob at Tractor Supply, who donated a piece of canvas to imprint the app on so Ro could paint it. By this time, the crowd had gotten into Gabe's patter and were dying of laughter. They had never seen anything like it from this guy. He was funnier than hell with his dry wit. The more he talked, the funnier it was. Continuing, he said, "Midwest Ace Hardware supplied all the paint for the paint by numbers portion. This was the only time that Ro and Carol had a disagreement. Ro wanted to use nipple pink, but Carol demanded the more exotic Arila Rose. Of course, just like at our house, Carol won the argument. By this time, men were bent over with laughter, while the wives had handkerchiefs to their eyes, so not to ruin their makeup. When laughter died down a bit, Gabe started up again. Of course, Ro did not use the whole gallon of Arila Rose, so we are going to auction the remainder later this evening. Ladies, if you want to increase the libido in your bedroom, please consider an accent wall of Arila Rose to get your husband in the mood." Howling laughter again stopped whatever Gabe was going to say next. Carol was actually smiling at him, glad that he was not having a volcanic fit of anger at her. Rolando was the one who was beside himself with anger. His face was red. His dark eyes were boring a hole in Gabe's back. It took a few moments to quiet down as Gabe held up his hands to quiet the crowd. All laughter aside, I want you to realize the amount of commitment Carol has to this organization. Just like Lady Godiva, this portrait displays total dedication to her cause. That is to remind people that we need the arts to complete ourselves. So, as you consider your generous donations for this coming year, please look at the portrait not as a beautiful woman, but as someone who really cares and is willing to put herself out for the cause. Carol Martin Digger, please step up and let us thank you for pushing the envelope for a great cause. At this point, Carol stepped in front of the podium, but was too overwhelmed to speak and choked up by love in her heart for her man. She bowed as the entire audience roared their approval. She lip-synced the words, "Thank you. Thank you to the crowd and I love you to Gabe. Still holding the microphone, Gabe said, now that your hearts have been opened, please open up your wallets to keep this great organization a jewel in our community. To start this off, Grave Diggers Inc. will contribute $10,000 to our arts commission tonight. And thank all of you for your work and care for this organization. No matter how large or small it is appreciated. Thank you for all you do, and keep in mind, for all your cemetery needs, please remember Grave Digger Incorporated. Once more the crowd roared at what the big quiet man had to say. Gabe laid the microphone down, turned to Carol, gave her a kiss and said, "You look lovely in that portrait. Thank you for what you said to the patrons." With that, patrons came to Carol with checks and commitments to keep the Arts Commission a vibrant organization. Gabe walked away to get a drink and was approached by Rolando, who offered his hand to Gabe and growled, "I'm returning your used wife to you now. I spent a lot of time with your wife nude, sometimes painting, sometimes screwing." Gabe smiled and said, "Well, if you did have sex with her, I doubt she would remember it as small as your dick is. She's used to much larger, stronger, and long-lasting one than what you have to offer." Rolando could not take that direct slur and swung his left hand to hit Gabe's face. Gabe saw it coming and clamped down hard on Rolando's right hand, making him crumple in pain. His left hand did not touch Gabe, so he stumbled off to find an ice bucket. Gabe had been home for a while when Carol came roaring into the house. With flaming eyes, she said, "Big strong guy like you afraid of being slapped by a frail artist. You're just a bully, and you took advantage of your strength." Gabe tried to hold her and explain, but she snarled, "Leave me alone. I have to pack for my trip." "That's not going to happen." He left the room as a shoe flew by his head. On Thursday afternoon, he saw on Rolando's locator, he was at the warehouse while Carol's was at her office. He thought it was time to pay the artist a visit. Rolando was walking out of the warehouse with his briefcase when Gabe slugged him in the stomach. He carried the gasping painter to his truck as if he was sick. Zip ties were put on his hands and feet, then he was shoved to the floor. Gabe saw the FedEx box that contained Carol's portrait that was ready to be shipped to New York. He picked up both the portrait and the stranded briefcase. Once he gained his breath, Rolando started to berate Gabe, but a sharp slap to the face restored the silence. At their farm, Gabe carried Rolando by the belt like a suitcase to one of the recently dug holes. Rolando was once again cursing him, but Gabe completely ignored him. Instead, he threw him head first into the grave. All of a sudden, Rolando's voice and tenor changed. Unknown to Gabe, Rolando was claustrophobic. He was now whimpering and crying like a baby to be in such small confines. There was a wood railing all around the bottom of the grave that Gabe put a half-inch thick sheet of plywood on. It covered all of Rolando except his face. Gabe crawled into the hole, sat on the plywood, and looked at the weeping artist. The large man said, "My wife is my life. If she leaves me, I have no reason to live. To prevent me from dying, you are going to have to die." This set off all kinds of wailing by Rolando. When Rolando quietened down, Gabe said, "You have 6 foot by 3 foot by 2 foot less your body of air supply. This should last you about a week. Here are 2 bottles of water that should last you a week. I have taken off your watch so you have no way of telling time. You'll be in pitch black the entire time, wondering when the air will run out, or when you will die of thirst, or maybe die of starvation. Doesn't matter. You will die in this hole. A hole that is in a cow pen, and these animals will shit and piss on your grave until your bones turn to dust." He let that sink in for a few minutes, then said, "Do you know why you're to die like this?" Rolando whimpered, "No, I never had sex with Carol, never got close." Gabe laid a trap by saying, "You mean she was only going to set up your one-person show at the Met? Nothing else? No sex?" Rolando said, "There was no exhibit at the Met. I thought if I got her out of these backwoods shithole into the vibrance of the city, I could have sex with her. She has too much sophistication to be wasting her life here." Gabe snarled, "And ruin my marriage and my life like you have so many others, casually going around destroying good people. How many marriages have you broken up in your life? How many men have lost the love of their life to your seduction of their wife? Those men lie awake at night and wonder why. Children losing parents to separation, divorce, poverty, and despair. You have destroyed so many lives with no regard for others. I know that murder is a mortal sin. I hope the good Lord forgives me for your murder in exchange for of all the lives I will save by your death." What a sad situation. Gabe put a pre-cut plexiglass sheet on the makeshift coffin to cover Rolando's head and shoulders as he started to shovel dirt onto the plywood. When there was 3 feet of dirt on the plywood, Gabe lifted up the plexiglass to look at Rolando's face one last time. Gabe was met with the stench of Rolando pissing and shitting himself from fear. He said, "You caused this. You. Then he shoveled dirt onto the plexiglass covering his face. Unknown to Rolando, Gabe put a 2-inch PVC pipe near his feet to make sure he did not die of suffocation. It took another foot of dirt before he could not hear Rolando's screaming. He was laughing as he walked back to his truck. Happily, he thought, that's scaring the shit out of him. I'll go back sometime Saturday, dig him back up and tell him to never come back. If that doesn't cure him of destroying marriages for his personal pleasure, I'm sure some despondent husband will kill him. He giggled and laughed as the locator on Carol's car went back and forth to the warehouse and to his apartment, apparently trying to find Rolando. Funny, he thought, when she gets home tonight, he'll be right under her nose. Gabe was in a good mood that evening and disregarded any snide remarks by his wife. It appeared to him she was wanting to fight with him to justify her going to New York. She even mentioned Rolando's name a couple of times, but she could not draw a crossword out of him. Surely, she thought her husband still cares for her and wants her back. Maybe he doesn't want me back if I have sex with Rolando. What if her rejection of his strongest feelings is enough for him to no longer care for her? She really did love him but wanted to go to New York. She had no plans to have sex with the Spaniard, but it might happen because of his charm. They did spend a lot of time naked with each other, and sometimes she was aroused by him. She was concerned that she had not talked to Rolando since lunch. He said they were going over travel plans that afternoon. Friday morning, after kissing the Kim and Carrie goodbye, she asked Gabe to take her bags downstairs and to the car. No need, you're not going anywhere, he replied. Disgustedly, she grabbed the handle and dragged each suitcase down the wooden suitcase by herself, making as much noise and scratches as possible. It took her several trips, but she was finally loaded and went back into the house. She walked up to him as he was refilling his coffee cup and said in a very deadpan manner, "Goodbye. I'll see you when I get back. I love you." He held her arm and said, "Remember, I have always, and I mean always, loved you and only you. Everything I do is for you. Please don't forget that. We complete each other." He had a tear in his eye as she kissed him, then walked away. Here came the hardest task for Gabe. He was going to go through Rolando's cell phone and laptop to research correspondence between his wife and the Spaniel. He only looked for her calls or texts on the cell phone. He didn't care about any other conversations. A small booklet of passwords fell out of the laptop case, making his job easier. Neither the texts or emails disclosed any sexual activity nor any flirting with Carol. There was, however, a running conversation with someone listed as X1X, no name, just X1X, that intrigued him. What he read chilled him to the bone. X1X asked him, "What is the plan for this girl you got knocked up down there?" His response was, "I'll bring her to New York, put her in the house and wait until the kid is born. The woman is very good looking, and we can sell the baby for at least $15,000. We'll let the girl heal up a week or two, then we can either put her in the porno stable, or sell her outright to Africa or the Middle East. 20-year-old natural blondes can bring us at least $45,000. X1X emailed, "What's the plan on this, Carol?" Rolando emailed, "This is a personal vendetta. I am going to screw her until she can't stand, then send the videos to her cuck husband. She is perfect for the MILF video trade. We can keep her drugged up for about 6 months, doing at a couple gangbangs a day. Then we drop her as no one wants to see a big meat in an even bigger sloppy hole. Of course, hubby will get the full collection of videos. That is when I send her back to hubby, but not before I have her tattooed with 'Drilled to Satisfaction' by Rolando on both front and back." Gabe went wild. My God, what a horrible person. How many mothers cry themselves to sleep at night worried that her daughter is in danger? There is no way he can be allowed to continue this type of decadence. In a rage, shouted into the PVC air tube, "Hey stupid, you wanted to put a tattoo on my wife. I'll show you how worms make tattoos on human body. You will die a long, slow death on your way to hell." He pulled out the air tube, completed the filling of the hole, and scattered the combination of dust and dried cow shit over the grave to make it look undisturbed. He copied the incriminating email about Carol and brought the computer and cell phone to the local sheriff for transferal to the FBI. After review of the horrible emails, the sheriff asked if Carol and Chloe knew of their plans. Solemnly, Gabe said, "No, I think it would be best if you contacted both of them." Late that afternoon, Carol dejectedly drove into their yard. Her plans were blown to bits. Both Rolando and her trip to New York had vanished. The sheriff showed her what that despicable Rolando had planned for her and Chloe. She could not believe he could be so cold-heartedly evil. She knew that Gabe had been right the entire time. She had ignored and berated him for his opinion. As she parked her car, she saw a change in the yard. One of the holes in the cattle pen was filled in, just like it had never been there. She thought it odd, but she needed to go to their home and make up with Gabe. As she looked toward the house, she saw the shadowy frame of Gabe in the doorway. The large man loomed ominously in the evening light. The giant did not wave to her but turned and walked back into the house, out of sight. The house was quiet as she entered, too quiet. She took a few steps and saw Gabe sitting in his office, drinking a scotch, wordlessly looking at her. Then she saw it, the portrait, her portrait, on the wall in Gabe's office. Rolando was to ship that to New York today. Why does Gabe have it? Then her hazy, confused brain started to have some clarity. She looked at the filled-in hole. Or is it a grave? Whose grave? There's only one person missing, Rolando. Then she turned to Gabe and her portrait on her wall. Back and forth her head spun between the variables in this equation. Suddenly, it was crystal clear Rolando was buried in the cow pen. Wild panic swept in. Who's to be buried in the other grave? There's no one left in this shitstorm but me. Am I going to disappear in the grave next to Rolando? Did he think I had sex with Rolando, and now I am to disappear? She cried as she hugged his chest and said, "Oh my God, I have been so wrong about Rolando. I never had sex with him. You know that, don't you? Cheating on you would be the last thing I would ever do." He slowly moved away from her and looked in her eyes. Carol saw no emotions, just two calm eyes. A chill went down her spine. Gabe then slowly took a step near her and said, "Make sure you always listen to your loving husband. When he says you need to cut ties with someone, you don't berate him and listen to him. As for cheating on him, you are absolutely right, Carol. It would indeed be the last thing you ever do." Gabe walked up to her and hugged her tight and kissed her on her forehead. The FBI used Rolando's cell phone and computer to capture and incarcerate the deviants that had created the sex trafficking operation. They could not locate Rolando and surmised he had gone underground. Carol's portrait remained in Gabe's office. However, the door was usually locked, preventing Kim and Carrie's friends from admiring Carol's portrait. The Arts Commission used the generous gifts from the gala to plan a larger children's program for the next year. The priority will be to use local talent rather than utilize the traveling artist program. Carol and Gabe didn't go into work the next day. They needed to reconnect and refresh after a very troubling week. Gabe filled in the empty grave and hid a camera to see if Carol would go to the pin. She never went anywhere close to it. A week later, Gabe and Carol left for a few days in New York City, hiring a dose hen for a 2-day private tour of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Carol later fondly referred to it as their second honeymoon. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.